Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy the story. Remember to like and subscribe. And now the story.
Let me start out with this is not my story. I heard this down at a veterans hospital where I work and now prepare for a HOA imploding.
Jack Wilson was a loner. He didn't have many friends or family or anyone to care for. His house, his pride, and his duty were all he had. For 6 years he had served in the Navy, and he had been deployed to several hotspots around the world.
He had seen the worst of humanity, but he had also done his best to protect his country and its allies.
He had earned his honor, his dignity, and his respect.
But his house was also his love.
It was a modest one-story bungalow in a gated community with a small lawn and a porch. He had bought it with his savings from his naval service, and he had maintained it with his own hands. He had painted the walls, fixed the roof, and mowed the grass. He had made it his home. Unbeknownst to Jack, his cherished abode teetered on the edge of jeopardy. The shadowy dealings of his homeowners association, known simply as the HOA, remained concealed from his discerning eye. In the clandestine depths of their scheming, they orchestrated the seizure of his property, swiftly exchanging ownership and covertly lining their pockets with the proceeds. Ignorant to their nefarious agenda, he remained oblivious to their transgressions against the law, his rights violated, and his trust callously betrayed by their cunning maneuvers. He only found out when he came back from his last deployment. He had been away for over a year, fighting in a war zone. He had survived many attacks, explosions, and ambushes. He had lost some of his mates, but he had also saved many others. He had done his duty and he was ready to go home. Arriving at his house, a sense of anticipation enveloped him, craving the solace it promised.
The image of his manicured lawn, welcoming porch, and sturdy walls danced in his mind, a vision of home awaiting his return.
But none of that was there.
Instead, a stranger stood on his porch, a woman he had never met before. A different car, a different cat, a different lawn.
A different house. Confused and furious, he confronted the stranger, who claimed to be the new owner of the house. She said that she had bought it from the HOA, who had told her that the previous owner had died. She said that she had the papers, the keys, and the rights to the property. She said that Jack had no business there and that he should leave. Jack was shocked and outraged. He knew that the stranger was lying, that the HOA was lying, that the whole thing was a scam.
He knew that he had paid his dues and taxes, that he had not died, that he had been on deployment.
He knew that he had the law, the justice, and the truth on his side. He knew that he had to fight back. He contacted his lawyer, who contacted the JAG, the Navy Judge Advocate General's Corps. They explained to him that what the HOA had done was illegal, that they had violated the Service Members Civil Relief Act, or SCRA, which protected the rights and property of sailors on active duty.
They told him that he had a strong case and that they would help him sue the HOA.
They filed a lawsuit and they went to court. They presented the evidence, the witnesses, and the arguments. They exposed the HOA's fraud, corruption, and greed. They proved that the HOA had broken 11 federal laws and that they had harmed Jack and his property.
The judge was furious.
He ruled in favor of Jack, and he awarded him $1.5 million in damages. He also ordered the HOA to return his house and his property or face federal prosecution. He also ordered the HOA to be dissolved and the board members to be investigated. He said that what they had done was despicable and that they deserved to be punished. Jack was relieved and happy.
He got his house back and he moved in with his cat, his lawn, his walls. He got his home back and he resumed his life.
He got his justice back and he felt vindicated. He never saw the HOA board members again. He heard rumors that they had been arrested, convicted, and sent to prison. He did not care. He was glad that they were gone and that they could not hurt anyone else.
Jack emerged from the crucible of adversity, his home restored, his honor intact.
Those scars of betrayal may linger, They serve as a reminder of his unwavering resolve, a resolve forged in the crucible of adversity, tempered by the fires of justice. Joe loved his farm. He had lived there his entire life ever since he was born. His grandparents had bought the land when they were young, and they had passed it down to his parents and then to him. He had worked hard to keep the farm running, growing crops, raising animals, and selling his produce at the local market. He had a simple but satisfying life, and he was proud of his farm. But things changed when a developer came to town.
He wanted to buy Joe's farm and the farms of his neighbors and turn them into a fancy housing estate.
He offered Joe a lot of money, but Joe refused.
He didn't want to sell his farm, his home, his legacy.
He wanted to keep it in the family and pass it on to his son, who was a lawyer in the city. Some of his neighbors, however, were not so loyal. They sold their farms to the developer, and soon enough, Joe was surrounded on 3 sides by the new community.
He didn't care, though.
He just went about his business because his land was larger than all 3 properties that were sold. He had enough space and privacy to do his own thing, and he ignored the new neighbors. But the new neighbors did not ignore him.
They formed a homeowners association, or HOA, and they started to give Joe a hard time.
They issued him fines for such things as his grass not being cut, even though it was his hayfields.
They complained about his barn, which they said was an eyesore, and the color of his house, which they said was outdated.
They moaned about the noise he made in the morning with his tractor, which they said disturbed their sleep. Joe told them to mind their own business.
He told them he was not a member of the HOA, and they had no authority over him.
He told them he had been there long before them, and he had the right to do whatever he wanted on his own land. He told them to leave him alone. But they did not leave him alone.
They said that because he was in the middle of their community, he had to follow their rules, like it or not.
They said that he was lowering their property values and ruining their quality of life.
They said that he had to either comply or move out.
After 6 months and hundreds of fines, they decided to take a drastic step. They put a lien on his property, claiming that he owed them money for the unpaid fines. They said that if he did not pay up, they would foreclose on his farm and sell it to someone else.
Joe was furious.
He knew that what they were doing was illegal and that they had no right to his farm.
He knew that he had paid his dues and taxes and that he had never agreed to join the HOA. He knew that he had to fight back.
He called his son, who was an expensive lawyer with his own law firm. He told him what was going on and asked him to help. His son was outraged and agreed to take the case. He said that he would sue the HOA for harassment and for illegally putting a lien on his property. He said that he would make them pay and make them regret ever messing with his father. They filed a lawsuit and they went to court. They presented the evidence, the witnesses, and the arguments. They showed that the HOA had no jurisdiction over Joe's farm and that they had violated the law and his rights. They exposed the HOA's fraud, corruption, and greed. They proved that the HOA had broken federal and state laws and that they had harmed Joe and his property. The judge was not impressed and ruled in favor of Joe. Also, he awarded him $300,000 in damages. He then ordered the HOA to remove the lien from his property and to stop harassing him. He also ordered the HOA to stay away from Joe's farm. Joe felt a huge weight lift off his shoulders and a smile spread across his face. He finally had his farm back, and he made sure to express his gratitude to his son.
"I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Thanks for standing up for me." His son gave him a big hug, saying how much he loved him and how proud he was. He promised to come by more often, maybe even lend a hand with the farm work. After the court drama was over, they headed back to the farm. They looked out at the familiar sight of the hayfields, the barn, and the house. It was more than just land. It was their home, and they celebrated their triumph together. But their happiness was short-lived.
2 days later, Joe's barn was on fire. Someone had set it ablaze during the night, and it burned to the ground. Joe lost his animals, his equipment, and his memories.
He was devastated, and he wondered who could have done such a thing. He soon found out.
The HOA president, who had been the leader of the harassment campaign, had been the arsonist. He had been angry and bitter about losing the lawsuit, and he had wanted revenge. He had sneaked into the farm and he had torched the barn.
He had laughed at Joe's misfortune, and he had thought that he had gotten away with it.
But he had not gotten away with it. Joe had security cameras everywhere, and they had captured the whole thing. They had recorded the HOA president's face, his car, his license plate. They had provided the evidence to convict him. The police arrested him and charged him with arson and destruction of property.
He faced a long prison sentence and a hefty fine. He realized that he had made a huge mistake and that he had ruined his life. Joe was sad and angry, but he was also relieved and hopeful. He was sad and angry about losing his barn, but he was relieved and hopeful that justice had been done.
He was glad that the HOA president had been caught, and they could not hurt him anymore. He was also glad that he had his son, who supported him and comforted him.
Happy that he had his farm, which he could rebuild and restore.
He was fortunate that he had his home, which he could enjoy and cherish.
So you know how sometimes things just go haywire when you least expect it? Well, let me tell you about this time when our homeowners association decided they were going to shake things up real good. It all started with this announcement, like out of nowhere. The HOA, bless their hearts, they decided that from now on, nobody's allowed to park their cars on the street. Nope, not even for a quick run to the neighbor's house or anything.
They said if your car's out there, it's getting towed. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now you might be thinking, okay, what's the big deal?
Well, let me tell you, it's a big deal when your driveway's already jam-packed and you got a shindig planned. See, my wife's turning 45, and we've been gearing up for this bash for months. We're talking about balloons, streamers, the whole shebang. So, when the day finally rolls around and the guests start streaming in, we're all set for a good time. Or so we thought. But here's the kicker. With all the cars showing up, there's no way they're all fitting in our driveway.
And that's when things start getting dicey. Just when we're getting into the swing of things, who shows up but the HOA with their rule book in hand, ready to rain on our parade. They start calling in tow trucks like they're sending out party invitations.
Well, I wasn't having any of it. I mean, we've been planning this bash forever, and they're not going to ruin it with their towing nonsense.
So I do what any reasonable person would do. I call the cops. Turns out the HOA didn't even have the right to do what they were doing. You see, the streets aren't even theirs to control. They belong to the city, plain and simple. But that's not even the half of it. Get this. The HOA had been charging us for stuff like street sweeping and snow removal, and then pocketing the cash. Can you believe it? I sure couldn't.
So the cops step in and they lay down the law. They tell the HOA and the tow truck drivers that if they so much as lay a finger on a single car, they'll be facing theft charges.
Now you'd think that'd be the end of it, right? Wrong.
The residents weren't about to let the HOA off the hook that easy.
We banded together and filed a lawsuit to get back every penny they'd swindled from us. And let me tell you, justice was served.
The court ruled in our favor, and we got every cent back, every last dime. But we didn't stop there. Oh no, we had bigger plans. We decided enough was enough.
It was time to clean house, starting with the HOA board. We rallied the troops, and when it came time to vote, we showed up in droves.
Long story short, we kicked those old board members to the curb and brought in some fresh faces who actually had our best interests at heart.
And let me tell you, it's been smooth sailing ever since. So the next time you think about messing with a neighborhood's parking situation, you might want to think twice.
Because when push comes to shove, the little guy, or in this case, the little neighborhood, always comes out on top.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.